The directions or the instructions given by this site staff to the contractor should carry no effect unless it is authorized in writing by the architect. Same goes to the instructions involving variations. Whichever instructions given by this site staff, the contractor do not need to follow. It will be unless confirmed by the architect instructions. In fact, this site staff is just a representative to the employer, assisting the architect in terms of the work progress, but he do not have the final say. Whichever instructions or directions given, it must come from the architect, and the architect will need to confirm and seek consent with the employer, especially for those that may involve variations. Technically, the employer do not have the power over the construction work. Everything will need to be managed by the architect. Therefore, the contractor will have to work closely with the architect. Next, it will be the contractor, which is also named in the Articles of Agreement. It can be the contractor's legal successor, or personal representative, or any persons to whom the right and obligations of the contractors have been transferred with the agreement of the employer. The contractor will carry out the construction work and to deliver the work as per the quality and specifications stated within the contract. There will be site agent, who is appointed by the contractor. This site agent will be the authorized site representative by the contractor, representing on behalf of the contractor. The site agent is the assistants and supervisory staff to execute the work, and he will need to be full-time on site. If he is unable to be full-time on site, he will need to delegate a deputy in his place. That means there must be a person representing the contractor to be stationed on site full-time for the construction work. It is either the contractor himself, or his appointed site agent, or the deputy of the site agents taking the place of the site agent. The contractor site must have personnel on site full-time in order to receive directions or instructions by the site staff or by the architect. In the case that the instructions is given by the site staff, the contractor site will need to seek confirmations from the architect. Otherwise, if the directions or instructions is not recognized by the architect, the contractor may not be able to claim for the work being done associated to the instruction. In the case that the site agent is not performing well on site, the architect may reasonably instruct to remove the site agent. In this case, either the contractor himself need to be on site, or he will need to assign or appoint another site agent which is competent. This is about the employer, site staff, contractors, and site agent. Site staff is representing the employer, and the site agent is representing the contractor site. The architect, it will be in between the employer and the contractor. Employer deliver the needs and requirements to the architect. The architect will translate it into the instructions to the contractor. So theoretically, there shouldn't be direct instructions from the employer or the site staff to the contractor, and all the formal instructions will fall onto the architect, which is to be centralized in order to minimize the miscommunications, misunderstanding, or any ambiguities. Next, we talk about the other parties that may involve in the project. This include the nominated subcontractor, nominated supplier, appropriate authorities, and service provider. This terminology appears in the PAN contract. Before we enter the clause of the PAN contract, we will need to first knowing what are those people. The nominated subcontractor is the subcontractor which is nominated by the architect. It is stated under clause 27.1. In fact, this NSC can be nominated by the employer due to certain considerations. We mentioned that the employer has no direct involvement in the project. Therefore, this NSC must be nominated by the architect. On paper, what is special about this NSC? Although it is nominated by the employer or the architect, it is actually a subcontractor. So this NSC is actually subcontracting with the contractor. The relationship, it will be similar as the diagram here, which we have mentioned in our previous videos. The employer engaged architect to manage the project. The project is awarded to the contractor, which at the same time, the employer will nominate an NSC, and this NSC will be formally nominated by the architect and put under the responsibility of the main contractor. In terms of this responsibility, the NSC will deliver the work to the main contractor, and the main contractor will deliver the works to the employer. The relationship between the employer and the NSC is not direct. There is no direct delivery of the works from the NSC to the employer. Next, we talk about the nominated supplier. The principles is similar to the nominated subcontractor, only that this representing a supplier. The supplier supply materials or products which are necessary for the project. Again, this nominated supplier is theoretically nominated by the employer. On paper, it will be nominated by the architect. And this nominated supplier will supply materials to the contractor. The relationship, it will be the nominated supplier directly to the contractor, and the contractor deliver the work to the employer. There is no direct relations between the nominated supplier and the employer. Next, you will see the appropriate authorities in the clause of this PAN contract. It is a general term representing the authorities that having the jurisdictions over the work, which include the local authorities, the government bodies and departments, and also authorized agencies. For example, local council, land and survey, the Department of Irrigations and Drainage, and others. All the development project will require approval or endorsement by the respective local authorities or the relevant government agencies. The land and survey deal with the lot boundaries. The local councils deal with the buildings and infrastructures. And the departments of irrigations and drainage deals with the drainage system. Some projects may involve departments of environment as well as the others, depending on the type and natures of the project. Next, it will be the service provider. These are the companies of agency providing the water, electricity, telephone, sewerage and other related services. You know that building structures as per constructed by the contractor, we'll need to ensure the functionality as well. That means it should be well equipped with the water supply, electricity, telephone, sewerage and other services. This will require the contractor to work closely with this service provider. So when you see the term service provider, you know that it deals with those services. Next, we look into different parties within the project. This includes the architect, the consultant, the engineers, the quantity surveyor, as well as specialist consultant. These are the professionals who are named under the Articles of Agreement. This is the typical outline of the Articles of Agreement. Article 1 will be the contractor's obligations. Article 2, it will be the contract sum. Article 3, it will be architect. Article 4, the engineers, civil and structural engineers, and mechanical and electrical engineers. Then Article 5, it will be the quantity surveyor. Article 6, specialist consultants. 7, definitions or terminologies. 8, meanings. Especially these professionals, it is nearly compulsory to have the architect, engineers and quantity surveyor. The specialist consultant, it will be depending on the needs. And the engineers will have two types. Civil and structural engineers, dealing with the infrastructures and the buildings. Mechanical and electrical engineers, dealing with the building services. If any of them resign, another person will need to be appointed within 28 days, as the project must be supervised under these professionals. Now this architect, it will be the person named under Article 3, and he must be a professional architect approved by the Board of Architects Malaysia, or any other forms of practice registered under the Architect Act 1967, approved by the Board of Architects Malaysia. That means someone equivalent to the professional architect as recognized by the Board of Architects Malaysia. To make it simple, the architect here is referring to the professional architect as recognized by the Board of Architects Malaysia. Then there will be consultants. This can be the engineers, quantity surveyors, and or specialist consultant as appropriate. The engineers is a consultant designing for the building, covering the technical aspects to ensure the integrity and stability of the building, supervising the construction work done by the contractor. As for the quantity surveyor, it will deal with the quantity and the cost, as well as the claim related to the construction project. Now we have engineers. It will be named under the Article 4, and these engineers must be a professional engineers as approved or recognized by the Board of Engineers Malaysia. This professional engineer should be the professional engineers with practicing certificate, the PEPC. The PEPC has the powers of endorsing the technical drawing for the submissions to the local authorities. There will be quantity surveyors named in Article 5, and it must be registered quantity surveyor approved by the Board of Quantity Surveyor Malaysia. You see these three professionals, they have their own board. In fact, in Malaysia, we have an act over every single one of them. It is for the sake of the public interest, and the board will functions to uphold the integrity of the profession, ensuring all the professionals are work with high levels of professionalism and work of ethic, delivering professional service to the employer and the general public. Lastly, we have specialist consultant, who is named under Article 6. This specialist consultant is appointed by the employer for a certain design scope of the professional works, which is not covered by any of these professionals, and this specialist consultant will take full responsibility in terms of their design. It is only when it comes to some very specialized thing the specialist consultant will involve.